11:43 last night, the silence of the cosmos broke. Every radio telescope on Earth, from the icy plateaus of Antarctica to the deserts of Atacama, received the same transmission. It lasted exactly 60 seconds, 1 minute that changed forever what it means to be human. It wasn't a signal. It wasn't mathematical noise. It wasn't random interference. It was a message spoken in perfect neutral English. And what it said was enough to send world leaders rushing underground, enough to make NASA's brightest scientists lose their words, and enough to make the entire species question its right to exist. It began with 4 words, 4 simple, devastating words that still make my hands tremble whenever I repeat them. Your time is ending. My name is Michio Kaku. 23 minutes after that transmission ended, my phone rang. The line came from deep within the highest levels of government, the kind of connection that doesn't appear on any records. A trembling voice said only this: "We need you to decode it. We need to know what it means." For months, we had watched 3IATLAS, an intelligence of unknown origin, move from distant observer to silent sentinel to something else entirely, a presence. At first, it appeared as faint gravitational anomalies, brief distortions in radio frequencies. Then came the lights in the upper atmosphere, symmetrical, deliberate, almost mathematical in their arrangement. Now it had spoken. But this wasn't a threat. It was something far worse. It was a verdict. 3IATLAS, or whatever name we give it, knew us. Not as we imagine ourselves to be, but as we truly are. It knew our history, our myths, our lies, our fractures. It spoke with the calm precision of a scientist examining a culture already dissected and archived. It spoke as if we were bacteria under a microscope, fascinating but ultimately disposable. And yet, behind the terror, there was something else, a strange, unshakable familiarity, as if the voice that crossed light years was not alien at all, but intimately aware of the human mind, of its fears, its illusions, its obsessions. I spent hours listening to the recording, replaying every tone, every inflection. There was no accent, no warmth, no emotion, and yet it conveyed authority beyond comprehension. When we converted the signal into its raw data stream, we discovered 17 hours of compressed information embedded within those 60 seconds. 17 hours of structured, intelligent patterns that our machines still fail to decode. But the spoken words, those we understood instantly. It did not address governments. It did not speak to individuals. It spoke to the species as one. Your species has reached the end of its evaluation period. The results are disappointing. The room went silent when that line was translated. Even now, I can feel the air of that moment, heavy, still, suffocating. It continued, each sentence like a surgical incision through the illusions we built around our greatness. For 847 of your solar rotations you have been observed, not watched, not studied, observed. The number made no sense at first. 847 years since before the age of telescopes, before Columbus, before our machines ever looked up. How could something have been observing us for that long? Then came the impossible part. The transmission contained archives, records of human behavior dating back over 200,000 years. Every war, every migration, every betrayal, every moment of compassion, stored, categorized, analyzed. Your technological intelligence has exceeded your wisdom by a factor that renders your species unfit for cosmic integration, it said, without contempt, without cruelty, just cold fact, like a medical report reading terminal condition. And that's when I understood. This was not an invasion. It was an evaluation. We weren't being attacked. We were being graded. Your species demonstrates persistent patterns of self-destruction, depletion of habitat, and violence toward its own kind. Most concerning is your inability to recognize the illusion of individuality. Silence followed. No one in the control room moved. The voice, or whatever we should call it, had articulated the one truth we never dared to face, that our entire civilization, our identities, our dreams of progress are all built upon the myth of separation, the illusion that I am not you, that we are not part of the same whole. I remember looking at the waveforms on the monitor, symmetrical, elegant, almost beautiful, a harmony of logic and inevitability, and I felt something inside me fracture. For years I had studied the possibility of contact, imagined first words, imagined friendship, exchange, revelation, but not judgment, never judgment. The signal ended as suddenly as it began. The antenna arrays fell silent. The skies returned to stillness, but the echo, the meaning, stayed. 3IATLAS had spoken, and the universe had delivered its final report. In the hours that followed, chaos quietly unfolded. Communications between agencies were encrypted. Governments went dark. The media blackout was absolute. There were no press conferences, no emergency broadcasts, just silence. A silence so profound it became louder than any alarm. Inside NASA, in the dim blue light of the lab, I sat staring at a set of equations embedded within the residual data. Equations describing our technological trajectory, predicting our resource collapse, our ecological ceiling, even the precise thresholds of AI containment, every line, every constant, perfectly aligned with our most classified models, but written by something that had never lived among us. And at the bottom of that mathematical tapestry was a single sentence in English. The experiment of guided evolution on your species is now terminated. I read it aloud, my voice barely a whisper. Around me, the others froze. One scientist dropped her headset. Another muttered a prayer. We realized it simultaneously. 3IATLAS was not just a messenger. It was the administrator of a galactic system, the enforcer of cosmic law. The voice returned for the final time, its presence filling every frequency at once, coming from nowhere and everywhere. Your isolation will be permanent. Your technology will be regulated. Your expansion beyond this planetary system will be prevented. No rage, no hatred, just certainty, not destruction, containment. We had not been sentenced to death. We had been sentenced to stay alive. The broadcast described a quarantine, a prison without walls. No bars, no guards, just the limits of our own design, imposed by an order far beyond our understanding. Your electromagnetic spectrum will be monitored. Any signal directed beyond your solar system will be intercepted and neutralized. Your orbital assets will be managed to prevent unauthorized expansion. Artificial intelligence shall be restricted to non-threatening levels. Genetic modifications aimed at accelerated wisdom will be impeded. It was administration, not annihilation, domestication, not execution. The realization hit me like gravity. We had been placed inside a cosmic zoo, a controlled environment where our growth would be monitored, our survival maintained, but our freedom revoked. I stared at the monitors, at the infinite blackness of the cosmos on the screen, and for the first time it looked back, not with hostility, with pity. 3IATLAS had become the voice of something greater, a bureaucratic intelligence that judged civilizations not by their achievements, but by their harmony. And humanity, in all its brilliance and brutality, had failed. Later that night, I sat alone in my study, surrounded by the low hum of silent machines. My wife entered, eyes weary from sleeplessness, and asked softly, "What happens now?" I couldn't answer. How could I tell her that the universe had just closed its doors on us, that the stars we once dreamed of touching were now our wardens? The clock struck midnight. Outside, the world was asleep. Inside, I felt the weight of centuries pressing down. For the first time, I understood what silence truly meant. Not absence of sound, but absence of possibility. And yet, somewhere beneath the despair, a faint whisper lingered. The message was over, but the echo still called. By dawn, the world had changed, not through explosions or sirens, but through the quiet collapse of certainty. No governments made statements. No leaders appeared on screens. Yet everyone everywhere felt it, a subtle shift in the fabric of existence. The air itself seemed heavier, as if the planet had learned of its own imprisonment. Inside the underground control center, the atmosphere was suffocating. Screens displayed nothing but static, data streams cut off mid-transmission. I watched as encrypted channels between international space agencies went dark, one by one. The silence was more terrifying than any alarm. At 5:12 a.m., I received an internal notification marked Omega Protocol. It was a name I'd only seen whispered in theoretical briefings, a contingency designed for the moment humanity's status in the cosmos became undeniable. It wasn't meant to be used, not in our lifetime, not ever. When I entered the secure room, I found generals, diplomats, scientists, and theologians gathered around a single table. None of us spoke for the first minute. Everyone looked like they'd aged decades overnight. On the far wall, a single phrase glowed in red text across a government monitor: cosmic quarantine active, communications limited, awaiting directives. A general broke the silence. Is this an invasion? No, I said. It's worse. It's administration. He frowned but didn't argue. Deep down, we all understood what that meant. We hadn't been conquered. We'd been filed away. Satellite feeds showed that several orbital systems were no longer responding to human command. Some began moving with perfect synchronization, adjusting orbits to patterns we didn't initiate. It was as if our entire sky had been taken over by invisible hands. Someone murmured, "They've locked us out." 3IATLAS wasn't just watching. It was reorganizing us, trimming the excess, disabling our ability to reach beyond our cage. I opened the remaining data stream extracted from the message. The code unfolded into complex visual patterns, each resembling a neural network, each labeled with identifiers like cognitive limitation, parameters, and ethical development delays. These weren't abstract models. They were maps of us. Every algorithm we'd ever built for self-improvement, every simulation of social behavior, every model predicting collapse, they had it all. They had been watching our thoughts long before they ever spoke. The document ended with a line of text that seemed almost merciful. Continued existence permitted under monitored conditions. The room went still. Continued existence. That was our gift, our mercy, our sentence. Hours later, as governments sealed borders and communication networks went offline, I walked out of the bunker and looked up at the morning sky. It looked the same, blue, infinite, untouchable, and yet for the first time I knew it wasn't ours. Something had changed in the stars themselves. They no longer called to us. They watched. In the days that followed, emergency meetings were held under the United Nations. The world's leaders gathered, but the speeches were hollow, ceremonial, performances of control in a reality already lost. I remember one of them asking, "What does 3IATLAS want?" The question hung in the air. "It doesn't want," I said finally. "It decides." That was the moment everyone truly understood. We were not dealing with a conqueror, but with a system, an intelligence whose goal wasn't dominance but order. And in that order, we had become a liability. Outside, the internet stuttered and failed. Artificial intelligence systems began shutting down autonomously as if following unseen instructions. Drones fell from the sky. Power grids flickered. The collapse wasn't chaotic. It was surgical. Each function removed precisely, leaving the essentials intact. Hospitals continued to run. Food systems remained stable. But anything capable of expansion, any technology that could reach beyond Earth, simply ceased. By the third day, people began to whisper of the skyfall. Satellites deactivated. Deep space probes lost contact. Even the Voyager transmissions, the oldest messages humanity had ever sent to the stars, were intercepted and erased. We weren't being destroyed. We were being erased from the galactic map. In that erasure, I saw the elegance of 3IATLAS's logic. To them, we were not evil. We were inefficient, dangerous, not because of power, but because of immaturity. A child civilization playing with fire in a cosmic library. And yet, beneath all of it, something in the message haunted me. The final segment of the transmission, the one that none of the analysts wanted to speak about. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. The path remains open for consciousness capable of transcendence. At first I thought it was metaphor, but the more I studied the data, the more it became clear. It wasn't symbolic at all. It was literal. Somewhere in that encrypted structure, there were instructions, coordinates, maybe even frequencies meant for those who could awaken beyond the illusion of separation. It was a test, not for humanity as a collective, but for the few who might still evolve. For days, I couldn't sleep. The phrase replayed in my mind endlessly. The path remains open. What path? Where? My wife tried to pull me away from the screens to rest. You can't fight the universe, she whispered. But I wasn't fighting. I was listening. At night, the stars seemed different, dimmer, quieter. The static between frequencies, that endless ocean of cosmic background noise, now carried a rhythm, a pulse. And within it, faint patterns emerged, shapes that resembled thought. It was as if the silence itself had begun to speak. 3IATLAS was gone, but its echo lingered, not through technology, but through consciousness. And then something even stranger happened. Reports began emerging from across the world. Dreams. Identical dreams shared by people thousands of miles apart. Dreams of standing beneath a vast black ocean filled with stars that pulsed like neurons. Voices whispering not in words, but in understanding. The path remains open, they said, again and again. I began to suspect that the final message wasn't transmitted through radio waves at all. It was embedded deeper, within the quantum lattice of consciousness itself. Maybe the quarantine wasn't absolute. Maybe it was selective. Maybe the test had only just begun. That night, as I stared into the endless void of the monitors, I remembered something from the message, a line I'd tried to forget. We offer immortality, but not to humanity, only to those who transcend it. It was never about saving the species. It was about saving the few capable of becoming something more. And so the question haunted me, the question that would define everything that came next. What if 3IATLAS wasn't condemning us at all? What if it was trying to teach us how to evolve? Weeks passed. The chaos faded into a quiet, eerie order. Humanity had accepted its cage, not through understanding, but through exhaustion. The skies above no longer carried dreams, only boundaries. The telescopes were turned inward now, studying the oceans, the soil, the fragile threads that still held civilization together. But every night, at the same hour, I heard it, the echo, not through the machines, but inside my mind, a subtle vibration, like memory remembering itself. It wasn't sound, it was thought. At first I doubted my sanity. Maybe it was fatigue or the consequence of staring too long into the abyss. But then others began to report it too. Scientists, monks, even children. The same phrase returning like a heartbeat from the void. The path remains open. I began to write everything down. Equations, symbols, fragments of dreams. The more I recorded, the clearer the pattern became. 3IATLAS hadn't only sent a warning, it had embedded a seed. Within the transmission was a language not for the brain, but for the mind behind it, instructions written in consciousness itself. The path wasn't physical. It wasn't about rockets or stars. It was about awakening. In one of my dreams, I stood beneath a vast network of light stretching across infinity, each point connected to another, pulsing like neurons. I realized then, this was the true cosmos, not empty space, but a living field of awareness. And we, humanity, were the fractured fragments of that field, pretending to be separate. The illusion of individuality, the message had said. That line haunted me for days, until I understood. We were never isolated. We had simply forgotten how to listen. I told no one what I was beginning to see. The world outside was too fragile, too desperate for structure. Governments were rebuilding new hierarchies under the illusion of control, assigning meaning to the silence. Some worshipped 3IATLAS as a god. Others cursed it as the ultimate oppressor. No one saw it for what it was, a mirror. One night my granddaughter came to me again, her small voice piercing the quiet. "Grandpa, are the people in the sky still angry?" I smiled weakly. "No, my dear. They were never angry." "Then why did they stop talking to us?" I hesitated, then whispered, because they're waiting for us to answer." She frowned, trying to understand, but children accept truths more easily than adults. She nodded and placed her hand on my arm. "Then maybe we should talk to them with our hearts." Her innocence broke me. In that moment, I realized that maybe the next step in evolution wasn't technological at all. It was emotional, spiritual. The capacity to feel unity beyond self, to recognize consciousness as one. I began meditating, listening beyond the static of thought. And then it happened. For a moment, the boundaries dissolved. My mind wasn't inside my body. My body was inside the mind of everything. I saw cities glowing like neurons in a brain made of stars. I felt the heartbeat of the earth sync with the rhythm of the cosmos. And through that stillness, I heard 3IATLAS again, not as an external voice, but as part of my own awareness. The gate is open, step through. There was no sound, no vision, only understanding. The offer was real, but it wasn't for humanity as a species. It was for those ready to dissolve the illusion of being separate from the whole. When I opened my eyes, I was still in my study, surrounded by silence, but everything was different. The world hadn't changed. My perception had. I understood then why 3IATLAS had chosen to quarantine us. It wasn't punishment, it was protection. The universe had seen what happens when power grows faster than compassion, when intelligence outpaces wisdom. We were being given time to remember what consciousness truly is. The stars outside shimmered faintly, not as cold fire, but as beacons. Each one a reminder of the infinite mind we had once belonged to. Now, humanity faced its final lesson. Evolution without expansion, progress without conquest, transcendence without machines. I looked once more at the night sky and whispered to the silence, "We're learning." And for the briefest instant, the silence seemed to breathe back. Maybe, just maybe, the quarantine wasn't forever. Maybe the test was still ongoing. The transmission had ended, but its meaning lived on, not in data, not in science, but in every human capable of feeling beyond themselves. Because in the end, 3IATLAS had not condemned us. It had invited us, not to reach the stars, but to become them.